Really good question here that I often think about because it has to do with talking about immersion learning or Refold or doing this kind of learning with other people in your life. How do you do it? I'll add more to their questions here. How do you normally introduce immersion learning to people that don't know anything about it? So for context, this person has tried talking to their friends or sending them the Refold website, some old crashing videos, whatever. But all of these attempts are met with curiosity, but not really anything other than that. They know that there's not going to be like a silver bullet of trying to introduce somebody to this topic, especially if they only know about Duolingo or grammar books.
Sure.
What do you think?
Yeah, so I think we can do a better job of this on our website by making it more understandable. And we have thoughts of how we want to do that, but still in the works. But whenever I'm talking to someone in person about it, the first thing that I have to figure out is what do they actually already know and believe about language learning? Because if they know absolutely nothing, then that's a different conversation than if they already have pre-existing beliefs because they have heard from people on the internet that the best way to learn is by speaking. The way that you approach those conversations is dependent on what they already know. And then you need to figure out, okay, what do they already know and what do they already believe? And what are the counterpoints to those beliefs that will help them to understand that, oh, there is actually this other way that is useful to integrate into their studies. So, it's not like, as you mentioned, a silver bullet. And I would probably have to practice a conversation to think about how I would go through it. But generally,
do you want to do
a
practice conversation right now?
Yeah, just practice now. It's fine. The idea that I generally focus on is that how are you supposed to speak a language if you don't know what you're imitating? Language is mostly a game of imitation. And so if you've never heard the language before, if you can't understand the language, you're not going to be able to imitate it and speak it the way that a native speaker would. You can use grammar rules and translation as a sort of like a hack, as a way to speak quickly, but you're not actually imitating in that case. You're just translating from one language to another. And so if you want to imitate it, if you want to sound like a native, you want to express the ideas like a native, then you have to know what you're trying to imitate. So that's sort of like one of the core ideas that I propose. The other idea is that people have a really hard time and don't like to sit in classrooms. The translation-based approach is hard and it's complicated and it feels like math and
time-consuming.
It's time-consuming. It's not fun. Whereas the idea or the promise that you can actually learn by watching TV, browsing social media, watching YouTube, doing things that you already do for fun is a compelling idea to a lot of folks. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, I can just learn by enjoying myself. That's something that is sort of foreign to a lot of folks who think about language learning. But again, these may be the core ideas, but the way that you express that is different depending on what the learner already knows.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And also, some people have extremely strong beliefs about language learning, even though they have almost no experience with it.
Yeah, I don't really understand where those come from, but that is very common when I'm talking. Where does that come from? They're I don't know. All right, that's a weird take, but sure.
Yeah. You were telling me a story of somebody that you met who was telling you how to learn Japanese, and you're like, oh, how many words do you know? And they're 50.
No, I think it was less. But I was okay, this is my job. Sorry. I don't really want to have this conversation anymore. But when somebody is actually interested, I often try to give examples of how they use English, because usually that's the person I'm talking with. It's something in their native language that they can latch onto, right? Really common one is things like adjective order, which is a very complicated thing in English that we all do without thinking, right? It's completely unmemorized. And it's imagine trying to get an English speaker to memorize that order. The way that they would do it is by doing what sounds best and then saying, okay, this is the order, then therefore that is what the rule is, right? and getting people to kind of follow that logic of, you aren't actually memorizing the rule, you just know what sounds right and then can extract the rule from that. That's the same idea that we want to achieve with a target language, and the only way we can do that is with time, with sheer exposure to getting used to these patterns. And that often makes a lot more logical sense than saying, oh, just watch TV and you'll become fluent.
Sure.
And yeah.
Yeah, or to put it a little bit more simply, you could say, how in English, like, you speak English, it's your native language, you have an instinct, you can feel what is right and wrong, and we're
Right.
trying to reproduce that in a second language, and the way that you do that is through immersion.
Totally.